Communion by Edward Peeler Jr., also known as the Dread Pirate 42. This way, Father. Father Jimenez was led through the dingy and dilapidated ward to Sister Bethany's holding cell. He was shocked at the young woman's state. She had always been a positive presence in the Abbey, always cheerful and kind, ready to help anyone at a moment's notice, and so devoted. She was always early for morning prayers and Mass, loved discussing the nature of God at length with him and the other clergy. If he had been told 3 days ago that Sister Bethany was going to go on a rampage, smashing priceless statues in the church and trying to burn it down, he would have given a hearty laugh. He was not laughing now. She's calmer now than yesterday when she was brought in, said Dr. Jacob West, resident psychiatrist at St. Michael's Institute for Mental Health. She hasn't said much that makes sense. Maybe you, a friendly face, could help her find some lucidity. But I must warn you, Father, her symptoms suggest a severe case of schizophrenia. We'll work to help her get better, but there may not be much we can do. I have faith that you will do all you can, Doctor. And if it's not a mental illness, I think there's something I can do for her. You're speaking about demonic possession, I take it. When I see her, I will make that determination. But it never hurts to pray, Doctor. God is always watching. Dr. West arrived at Bethany's cell and opened it. Leading the way, he motioned for Father Jimenez to come inside. Poor Sister Bethany. She lied huddled in a fetal position in the corner of the padded cell, her hair wet with sweat and grime. The straps of her straitjacket splayed all about like an octopus. She had been such a bright and beautiful young woman of 25 with fair skin, red hair, and blue eyes. But now she was haggard. Her face was wrinkled like an old crone. Her eyes were glassy gray mirrors that stared at the way in front of her. There was a puddle of drool on the ground where her mouth was touching. Sister Bethany, said Dr. West, you have a visitor. An old friend has come to see you. Her head had slowly turned upward, but continued to stare, confused, not seeming to recognize either of the men, her mouth hanging open, continuing to drool. Father Jimenez stepped forward cautiously and knelt down next to his friend. Hola, hermana, the father said, smiling. He oído que has estado enferma. ¿Está bien? She tilted her head at an angle, as if trying to figure out what he was. After a moment of silence, her eyes cleared and her pupils dilated. Her flesh flushed suddenly with life as the sudden recognition had restored her mind a little. She still looked much older than she should, but Father Jimenez appreciated the small miracle. Esteban, she said, recognizing him, struggling to seat herself. Yes, my friend, he said, happy that she recognized him. Maybe she was better. What happened, Bethany? You've got to tell me. We're all so worried about you. Father, I did it, she said, suddenly invigorated. I found him. I saw him. Saw who? What are you talking about? I saw God. She seemed more herself now than she had been in days. Father Jimenez and the doctor had helped her up to one of the two walled benches in the cell. Father Jimenez sat across from her, asking her questions and listening intently while Dr. West stood at the door. She was lucid for the most part. There was an intensity to every word she said, and her eyes were still wide and beady. At least she was talking. You remember when I came to you when my mother died, she said, looking down thoughtfully at his shoes. Si, amiga. That was 3 years ago. It was very hard on you. My mother never approved of my choice. She thought I was wasting my time joining the church. She wanted me to get married. I know. She wanted grandkids. She had high aspirations for me. She always thought I would be an amazing doctor or scientist or make a killing on Wall Street. She thought I had what it took to be a CEO of my own company, a powerful woman in a man's world, and she could say, that's my daughter. But I knew it wasn't for me. I just wanted to get closer to God. She never could accept it. And then when she got sick... I remember. You asked me to see her in the hospital. I don't think she wanted me there. No. I wanted you to give her last rites, but she wouldn't have it. She was so stubborn. I begged her, please, Mom, at least let me do it just do it for me. And she just wouldn't let you. And so before she was gone, I took you aside and we prayed for her anyway. It may not have been her wish, but it was the right thing for the two of us to do. No, Esteban, you don't get it. That's not what I'm trying to tell you. It's okay. Take your time. I feel like the past couple of years, more than ever, I couldn't shake the idea that she might not be in heaven. I've prayed every day for some kind of sign that she's all right. I prayed for a vision. I may be unworthy, but I asked for God to send me a vision and let me know he's with her. And then I had one. I woke up Friday night, and my mother was there. She was just there in my room, nagging me like I was 14 again. No, hey, I'm back from the dead, I love you. No, she immediately started the same old arguments we'd always had. She told me to leave the church, she told me to leave now. She was bossy and agitated like she'd always been, but there was a tinge of fear in her voice. I tried to change the subject. I told her I was happy to see her. I asked her how she was here and what was it like on the other side. Everything I tried just annoyed her, and before I knew it, we were arguing like we did when she was alive. I think I scared the other sisters. I no doubt arguing with myself, but it happened. I wasn't seeing things. She was there yelling at me to quit the Abbey, and finally I had enough, and I told her that I prayed for 3 years from a sign from God that she was okay, and here she is. I thought I could prove to her that obviously my faith was well placed because God had brought her here before me. And that made her really mad. She got quiet and stared at me for a minute. Like I had said the most insulting thing I could. And then she said, "Okay, you don't believe me? You want a vision so badly? Okay, take a day for yourself tomorrow. Take a drive up to Worcester, Massachusetts. Go to the rural cemetery and crematory. Go to the middle of the cemetery and wait for nightfall. You'll get your vision. And then get out of the church for fuck's sake." And then she was gone. I did as she asked. I wasn't prepared to leave the church, but obviously God sent her to me for some reason. I took leave for the day and took a few hours to drive up to Worcester. I just managed to find the rural cemetery about an hour before sundown. I took a walk in the twilight among the trees and the old headstones. It was so beautiful, Esteban. I sat on a bench in the middle of the cemetery and waited. The sun went down. It was so dark. And then they were everywhere. There were people all around me, pulling themselves out of their graves. They looked up to the sky and they began floating upwards. I followed my eyes where they were going, and I realized the sky was not dark. It was like the twilight. It never went away. There was a dull glow on the horizon, tinged with gray, because there were gray clouds billowing in the sky. The clouds suddenly parted, and there was this huge object overhead. It covered all the sky that I could see. It was a great orange sphere, but not a perfect sphere. It looked as if it had a rough texture. Every so often there would be a large oval, or maybe there were pustules dotting its surface. The pustules had a golden glow to them, and the center of it all was a huge eye, a human eye, staring down at me. Or was it looking at me? Maybe it was looking at everything. Maybe I was too small to see. People kept floating up to the sphere. They looked happy for the most part. Most of them were calm, smiling, wide-eyed. As they got close to the sphere, almost touching the surface, these large, fleshy stalks sprung from its surface. These tentacles slowly reached out and grabbed the people one by one. They pulled them closer to the surface. And these mouths opened up all over the sphere. It was eating them, Esteban. It was eating them. Those mouths would open up and bite down on those people and cut them to pieces and swallow them whole. More and more of these tendrils appeared, grabbing all of them, and gobbling them up. The people didn't know what to do. They kept screaming in terror and struggling, but it didn't matter. And their heads and limbs and bodies started getting bitten in half as that thing was eating thousands of people, all over the sky. Their blood was raining down all over me. There were body parts everywhere on the ground, and the pieces it didn't swallow. Some of them didn't scream, though. They were happy. They were happy, Esteban. They didn't struggle. They smiled at it and let it eat them. Some of them didn't even make it to the mouths. They were just absorbed into the tentacles. Some of them broke free. Some of them didn't even make it that high up. They stopped themselves somehow. They saw what was happening. They just started screaming and screaming and screaming. It was so loud. I couldn't stand it. And then they started pulling their faces off and tearing off their own skin and ripping out their eyes. And they hurt themselves. They screamed louder and louder, and their bodies began to shift and change. Extra limbs with claws and mouths sprung out of their bodies. Spines grew out of their backs. Their faces and bodies twisted into countless horrible shapes. I couldn't keep track of all of them. I didn't want to. Blood-covered wings tore out of their bodies.
Instantly, they flew up and began tearing at the tentacles and freeing the others. But every time they did, the person they freed just became a skinless monster. A skinless, horrible monster like them. Good for nothing, but tearing at the thing that had grabbed them. The sphere seemed annoyed. Its dinner had been interrupted, so it would just occasionally swat at these creatures, crushing them aside. After a few minutes of this, several of the pustules burst open, and out flew these new forms. They were like men, but their skin was orange like the sphere. They had long, radiant golden hair, but instead of faces, they had one large eye, just like the one the sphere had. They had 2 sets of feathered wings. They had no legs, but 8 human arms with like a spider. As they flew out of the pustule, they showed signs of the stigmata. Their palms bled, and after a moment, blades of swords burst through the palms. The blood on the blades ignited into burning swords. More blood rained down as the beasts with swords and the beasts that were once men slashed and cut and tore at each other. But yet, there were some people left. They did not fly up. They did not get eaten. They did not scream and rip out their flesh or become devils. They just looked in horror and looked away. They scattered in all directions, flying every which way. They flew low to the ground, so the great eye could not see them. I followed one that flew past me with my eyes, and as I watched it bolt away like a bullet, I could see my mother in the distance. She was shouting at me to get up and run to her. I was too afraid to run. No one should see what I saw. Running? What sense does anything make when this is reality? I could feel myself slipping away as I was to rise up too. My mother flew up to me and grabbed me and pulled me away. Seconds later, one of the tentacles struck the bench I was sitting on, shattering it. My mother carried me like a baby. As we flew past more of the sword beasts and skinless beasts. For the most part, they were busy killing each other, but every now and then, either side would chase us. They almost caught us, but we were saved by the opposing army would attack our pursuers. The sound of screaming and violence began to die down. I could see the edge of the cemetery. My car was on their side of the road. Right before we reached the car, my mother said to me, Leave the church now, Bethany, and don't look back." I was back in my car, shaking and gasping for breath. The sky was normal again. There was no sign of the monsters, or the floating people, or the blood, or that thing in the sky. It was dark, but there were streetlights and cars passing by. I'm not exactly sure what happened next, but I got back in my car and drove back to the Abbey. It's kind of a blur. My mind kept going back to what happened. I couldn't focus. I got back to the church and I was looking up at Jesus, and we were wrong, Esteban. We've been lied to. It's all bullshit. He's not what we think he is. There is life after death, and it's horrible. There's nothing waiting for us there but evil. We're just food to them. We're not safe when we die. We can't even kill ourselves to get away. They're next to us, beside us, gnashing at the teeth to consume us, and he sees everything. He knows everything. We can't escape him. We are being bred to the slaughter. God is real, and he's eating our souls. He's just a giant, disgusting sea anemone, and we're fish he stings to death and swallows up. It's all a lie. It's all a lie. It's all a lie. The light of lucidity was going from her eyes. She began to blubber and mumble. She was back the way she had been when they pulled her from the burning church, wide-eyed and snarling. She had been back for just a moment, but she was gone now. "I'm very sorry you had to see that, Father," said Dr. Wesk, as they walked back to the lobby. "I'm going to start her treatment tomorrow. There's some new medications that may calm her delusions, and if she can handle it, we'll see if we can break through to her with some counseling. As I said before, these types of delusions are common with schizophrenics." "Yes, Doctor, I suppose that's good." The color had drained from his face. "But she was not like this before. She took her mother's death hard, but she never acted like this, or even told me that she was trying to have a vision. How could this happen so fast?" "Well, there usually are signs, but it's not unheard of for a person to have a sudden nervous breakdown." "You sure that's it, Doctor? Maybe she was drugged or tried peyote or something that gave her a false vision." "Well, no. Her lab work shows she's clean. There were no drugs in her system. But listen, I know that was all very hard to hear, but I wouldn't take it to heart. I've seen many people with all types of dementia and mental disorders. Her mind and emotions right now are playing tricks on her. The only danger in those visions is that she believes them, and we're going to help her. Doc, she was lucid in there. She's never lied to me. What if she really did see something broke. Something that maybe I don't... Oh, come on, Father. You're not actually taking all that seriously, are you? Dr. West put his hand on Esteban's shoulder and gave him a smile. Have a little faith. Don't tell me a holy man like you is shaken so easily. Faith does not come by easy. But maybe you're right. Maybe it is a test for the both of us. They were about to part at the hospital entrance. After exchanging pleasantries, Father Jimenez looked into Jacob West's eyes grimly, looking for something, maybe hope. What do you believe in, Doctor? West paused to think about it for a moment, before answering. No offense, Father, but I believe in what I can see, what I have tactile proof of. The world around us is beautiful and terrible all at the same time. There's many great astounding things I get excited about every day, and I turn on the news and wonder what's the point. We don't treat each other terribly well on this planet. We don't live too long. But not all of us are so bad, and we just live the best lives we can before we die. And when we die, we're done. And that's good enough for me. But if there is something more, and it turns out to be what Sister Bethany saw, I know what I'd do. What's that? Run like hell. The end.